I've actually been playing a ton of Breath of Fire.
Ooh. Hey, we're going to talk about some Super Nintendo stuff, so.
Yeah, I saw you tweeting about Breath of Fire.
Because, again, because someone else was, bringing up the point. It was someone who, really didn't like Link to the Past, and they were talking about how, it's held up as one of the best Zeldas, and I just don't enjoy it. And I'm thinking about, how I feel about Breath of Fire, where I was like, I don't think this is a good game necessarily, but I love it. The first I don't know, half hour maybe even of the game is just so much bullshit. And it's cool. My character keeps dying because there's only one person in my party, and I keep getting poisoned by every enemy. So I'm always dead.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name's Kevin, and I'm here tonight with our hosts Randall Nollery.
Hey everybody.
And we've got our buddy John back once again, filling in for DJ Mandolini this week. John Hines is here again. How you doing, John?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Pretty good. And John's filling in last minute. I texted him maybe about 2 hours ago. So.
We love you, John.
Oh, thanks.
And yeah, and much love goes out to DJ. He's got lost a family member this weekend, and so he's dealing with that stuff this weekend and just be with the family. So much love out to DJ.
Absolutely.
This week as well. But
love you, DJ.
Yeah, much love. So, but anyways, we're here to talk about some video games and hopefully have a good time doing that. It's been a long week on my end. I don't know about you guys.
Yep.
But
pretty short.
But
week.
I've had a lot of time to play some video games, so I'm looking forward. I got a bunch of stuff I'm excited to talk about. So, including some new platforms that I've been dabbling with. So. We'll get to that a little bit later, but I think we're going to start things off with a game that Randall and I have both been playing a ton of, and kind of unexpectedly a ton of, at least for me.
Same.
I just kind of was like, I grabbed it on sale recently, and the game's called Chasm.
Yes.
And this is like a Metroidvania-esque. I shouldn't say esque. It is a Metroidvania.
It is, but there's some caveats
platformer.
There.
Yeah, it is procedurally generated, but I think. I guess just to get right into it, I feel like this game kind of, I wouldn't say it got a bad rap when it came out, but it got really kind of mediocre reviews. It was a game that definitely caught my eye for the art style. It's got a really nice pixel art.
Oh, yeah. I was baffled to see that, when I looked today on Metacritic, just because I was looking for more info on the game, it's got a 79 on Switch and a 72 on PC. I'm like, what the hell?
Really? It was kind of surprising to me as well. And I think part of that, and this is just a theory, but because it has that procedural generation, I think people, especially with this huge influx of roguelike games coming out or roguelite games coming out, I think people, you just hear procedural generation and you think you're going to get this deep mechanical experience. But really, this is using procedural generation to just give you a fresh layout every time. I mean, I don't think you're not doing anything in the means of buying into upgrades that are other than in your one main playthrough, but you're not
it's a
dying
run-based procedural generation,
right?
It's not run-based.
It's I guess, but the run is an entire game.
Right. You can still get game overs,
right? Yeah. You don't die, and then it doesn't reset.
Yeah, you save generation. And you just have save points. It just plays like a regular old any other Metroidvania game that is not procedurally generated, but it is going to essentially I think a lot of the puzzles end up being the same in some regards, or the room layouts are the same. But it just the way they're all strung together is different. So, if you do decide, hey, I'm going to play this game again, it's just going to be a totally different layout. You can't just memorize your path, which is pretty cool.
I think it's sweet.
Yeah, it's something that I think is definitely. I'm not someone who replays games, especially like this, all that often. I have my classics like Super Mario World and stuff that I just kind of revisit every year or so. But those are few and far between. And however, there's so many games coming out all the time. I can't even keep up.
Right.
Even remotely. So to go back and replay a game is not something I do too often, but to know that there's an incentive to do it is kind of interesting. Or even just the incentive of I don't know. It was kind of fun when I got stumped on a puzzle in the second area of the game, the catacombs.
Yeah.
And I ended up looking something up and just ended up reading there was like a bunch of debate going back and forth, people like not being able to figure out this puzzle, but it wasn't something I could just like look up. Okay, what's the code to this lock that I have to unlock? It's like, because even that is procedurally generated.
Really?
So even the do you know what puzzle I'm talking about? I don't want to
with like the
spoil
number of
anything per
swords
se.
and number of stars, that thing?
Yeah. And I will say I had a little bit of a tough time with that. I had a really hard time finding those like murals, I guess.
Yeah.
That sort of so I don't want to give anything away, but like it's almost seems like you're supposed to find these three things scattered throughout this zone of the map. Or this region.
They were all in the same area for me, though, when I found them. Were they for you?
They were for me, too, yeah. But I don't think they always are.
Oh.
But maybe that's not the case, because I did see a video online that had that as well. So maybe I'm wrong about that. But I do know I had a hard time, like, it just the way it was incorporated into the level, it just wasn't what I thought I was going to be looking for, which in hindsight is kind of cool, but it did... I almost hit that wall of like, I've combed this area. It's like it was the second area of the game that I visited. And these areas are pretty big. And I was like, I have combed every possible inch of this map and I don't know where to go next. And like, I can clearly see that I'm going to get some new abilities as the game goes on. Like I can see that I'm going to be able to wall jump because there's like these shafts that there's no other way you're going to be able to get there. And you can tell you're going to be able to, you get an ability to not necessarily... Before you wall jump, you get the ability to just kind of like grab a ledge.
Right.
So now you can like kind of grapple up a ledge that you couldn't reach before.
Yeah.
Or scurry up it. So it's pretty cool. It's I don't know. It isn't doing anything all that original or fresh or anything, but it just has a really, for me at least, I really like the atmosphere. The music's really great, especially like the town theme music. It's like this like bluesy, folksy guitar.
Yeah, it's almost
really
like kind of
somber.
melancholy.
Yeah,
but it fits, and it's good vibes. It just matches the vibe of the game really effectively. I feel like.
Yeah, it really this game just does a really good job of capturing the feeling of an adventure. Like I feel like I'm thinking about it when I'm not playing it, and I'm thinking about like being in that world. And I found, like I said, I kind of picked this game up as just like kind of a been playing some meatier games recently, some like bigger 3D games that I don't typically play too much of.
Right.
Like AAA stuff even almost. But I decided like, I'll just pick this up and kind of chip away at it and see how it is. And I've ended up probably spending the majority of my gaming time this week playing this and just keep going back to it again and again. And it's kind of fun. I like that feeling of like getting stumped and really combing these levels and then shutting it off and coming back to it later and you're something clicks or you just see like, oh, you know what, I didn't see there was that little area on the map that I haven't been yet.
Yep.
And again, you're unlocking new abilities that are, or you're altering the map. Like I just got through an area where you have to like the gardens where you have to open up these two like waterfall or these two pipes or something.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Then raise the water level so you can get to a certain area. So it definitely has like all the structure of a Metroidvania, whether you're getting the abilities or just altering the environment to get around to different areas. But it's structured really well. It's like, we talked about games like Hollow Knight and some other Metroidvanias on the podcast before, which I typically don't tend to gravitate towards these games. And I even ones that, like Hollow Knight that everybody seems to love. I don't get it. It didn't click with me for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But this one, for whatever reason, is just I keep coming back to it. And it has a lot to do with that art style. And you're going into these mines and you're rescuing townspeople, and they all have like a different thing that they're offering you once they're back in town. Like there's the blacksmith that you can get weapons from, or there's I don't know, there's a lady that you get recipes for potions, and she gives you. Then you can buy potions from her and stuff, and there's all sorts of different stuff, and you can find, everybody kind of has like a hidden like, hey, if you can find my deck of cards, I lost my deck of cards down there. If you bring them back, I'll give you a reward.
And that's another gameplay mechanic when you do actually.
Okay, well, I'd like to hear about that because I found the deck of cards, but I've yet to bring them back.
Yeah, it's if you remember from Super Mario Brothers 3, the kind of match 2 game that it throws you in once in a while, and like a bonus, it's very much that, but with like a time limit on it. a very like strict time limit. So, I mean, they don't really penalize you for not matching things immediately. You can kind of start feeling out where stuff might be and remembering, oh, the skull was over here and the potion was over here, and there's the other potion. Let me match those up. But yeah, the time limit is set up in a way where, like, unless you're lucky enough to hit a few matches randomly, you're probably not going to win that game. But when you do, you get a free token that you can use at his machine, his slot machine, to try and get 3 of a kind to get another 100 gold or whatever.
Huh. Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah, I've won it one time out of like 10 tries. It's not easy.
Yeah, the world just feels really alive. Like, I really like all these characters. I really like all the, I don't read every single like journal entry I find
don't either,
top to bottom, but I mean they're well written. They're they do like nice little things where like key characters or key things in the text are like highlighted in blue or green, or they stand out so you can just kind of skim it if you don't want to,
Yep.
but it just has a really like genuine sense of place.
Yes.
That I really appreciate, and I do think is what keeps me coming back. And the general like leveling up progression is pretty slow, and you're getting all kinds of new equipment. You have like it's not like a magic, but you have like an item that you hold in your right hand or whatever hand it is that is more like a projectile, like a la Castlevania, you know. And then your other weapon is just like your regular, either a sword or maybe it's an axe, and there's all kinds of different like swing patterns and stuff like that, or jab patterns.
Have you leveled up any of your magic sub-weapon stuff yet?
I don't think so, no.
That's what you can do with that spell lady
thing.
on the all the way on the left side of the town map. She'll
I don't know.
Upgrade for you.
Maybe I've not found her yet. I'm about a little over halfway through, at least as far as the map is concerned.
Okay.
And I've gone to like 4 or 5 regions now, I think. So I've had the mines, the catacombs, the gardens, and the keep. And I think maybe even one more region. I've like explored them very thoroughly.
Yeah.
And I'm only about 50% of the map is uncovered, so 55. So I mean, this game's pretty beefy. It is one of those too that like it adds to the tension. I guess to finish that thought about leveling up, it just seems like it's a nice slow progression, but to the point where like now that I'm backtracking into the like initial areas, I'm 1-hitting enemies instead of 2-hitting them, and it's just slow enough but satisfying enough to be like, oh, now I can just kind of mow through. But you don't feel like a powerhouse. You still feel like you're at the mercy of this world a little bit.
Oh yeah, you have to pay attention. You can't just dick around in combat, even with lower level enemies.
Yeah, because if you die, you're gonna go back to your last save point, which are literally like just like in Metroid or Castlevania games, like they're actually rooms that you have to find and save in, and that's your last check. Like no auto saving, no anything. So you got to make sure any progress you make. You could go, I went through the third area, the gardens, probably uncovered the vast majority of that map and without finding a save point for
that can
a
definitely
long
happen.
time.
Yeah.
So it definitely keeps you on your toes of like, okay, should I? And you do find a few food items here and there, and you can buy potions and stuff, but they're, the money, everything just feels really well balanced in the how much things cost, and you can't just rack up a million potions and just be like, okay, I'm invulnerable basically. Like you really have to, I don't know, you really have to like equip yourself and be prepared and be, switch your weapons up a little bit.
Totally.
Try different tactics. I'm having a lot of fun, and I plan on continuing through and finishing this game.
Yeah, that's a good point on switching up your weapons too, because different weapons kind of have different swings. Like the big swords kind of have an overhead swing, which is really helpful for spiders or whatever enemies are kind of more vertically inclined and, tend to attack from above.
Versus, or like the ones that jump around and stuff,
Or they could jump over top of you, and it's a good way to get a hit in while they're doing that, versus some of the more traditional like human enemies are kind of moving the way you are, where you can kind of do that juke dash backwards to avoid getting hit. They can do that too. Where you kind of want more of a spear type of like thrust motion, where you'll have to switch to a weapon type that does that. So it even forces you to kind of keep a couple different types of weapons, at least in my case, to combat different enemies. Yeah,
and even using like kind of like little techniques, or I don't know if you did this at all, but like you have a decent delay, but depending on what weapon you're using, but between swings, like I'm using like just kind of like a standard long sword. I think it's the Falchion.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's pretty standard swing, but there's like you can't do 2 quick swings like real fast.
Right, it's a little bit stronger.
But if you're in the air and you swing and then land, you can swing again right away. So you can get like 2 quick hits in if you that's kind of cheesing it a little bit. I'm sure it's just like resetting that animation a little.
I didn't notice that.
But it's a way to get like 2 quick hits in on a boss that you have to keep kind of jumping over or something. Or and some of the boss battle, I just fought a pretty tough that like Golem or that Titan boss battle. I think I posted a little video on our Twitter. Yeah, but that was like a pretty tough, intense boss battle. It took me a few tries. That was probably the first. Everything up to that point has kind of felt more like a mini boss, like just kind of gating an area.
Yeah.
That was kind of the first time I got to an enemy that was like, oh shit, this is a boss fight.
Yep. You want to be equipped with potions and breads and anything that can heal you when you get to a boss of that caliber. That's for sure.
And thankfully they do a pretty good job of having usually a close, like a nearby save point before there's a boss fight. So definitely worth, hey, I'm going to explore around. But again, even that feeling of like, they tease the little boss area with like there's usually like a little wooden pole with like a red flag on it
and the skulls
before you enter there. Yeah, and so you just know, okay, I haven't found a save point. It's been a while, so like before I go in there, like I gotta save or I gotta maybe even go back to town and buy some stuff or. But again, it's not easy. There's no like there's some shortcuts and stuff, but again, because there's no like you can't just pause the game and fast travel around. It really makes you. Again, it adds to that sense of adventure, even though it is a little tedious. I definitely have felt a couple times like, I got to run through these corridors again. Like it's a little bit much, but you're always picking up little bits of experience points. And again, but even though you're still backtracking so much, it's just everything's just really well balanced, at least in my experience.
Yeah, that never really bothered me, the backtracking, where it has in some other games like this. And I don't know, like I didn't even realize when I really first played this game that it did have that random world generation. I'm like, man, the level design in this game's good. Like,
it does not feel like procedural generation, really. I mean, the only thing I'll say is like there's occasionally like something that feels like that was a pretty tough challenge path, and then like, oh, but that kind of led to nothing. Where like or nothing, like it seemed like you were finding a secret path, and then it was just like, oh, it's just kind of a random. Chest of whatever.
I'm okay with that though.
But yeah, it didn't bother me in any means. But that was the only thing that felt a little bit of a disconnect. That was the only time I noticed the procedural generation, I would say. But still, like the platforming feels really good. Like the jump, it's a little floaty and a little weighty at the same time. Like you jump real high and kind of floaty, but then you come down kind of quickly. But it feels nice. It's a good.
I think it feels great. Yeah.
It's got it just you can variable jump heights. Depending on how hard you push the button or how long you hold it down. So yeah, it feels. The platforming feels great. The RPG elements of it feel great and very well balanced, and just a game that I feel like kind of got a little bit of a bad rap.
Yes.
It's not like this game got panned by any means, but it's just a game. And again, I think we were talking about this earlier off the air, but like. A game that there's just so many indie games coming out these days that this one just kind of came and went, and it was one that came out I think long before, or at least a year or so before on other platforms, and then when it came to Switch, caught my eye, and then saw it go on sale for half off, and I was like, okay, time to give this game a try. And man, I'm really glad I did.
Same.
And honestly, pretty much sold me on it right now. Like everything you were describing was like, as soon as you mentioned like leveling up sub weapons, I was like, ooh, hell yeah.
Honestly, cool, John, that in particular has given me this Breath of the Wild type of reinforcing loop where I'm going out on purpose sometimes, not even with like the main campaign objective in mind. I just want to like grind to get enough gold and other stuff so I can go back up to the surface and upgrade my sub weapons and maybe upgrade my armor to that other cool armor because I can craft with this other guy because I got enough gold pieces. Like, yeah, it's real good.
And that town just and as you find the different people in the town, like it really feels like it's coming back to life, and you're really helping like bring this town back. It's really
and the lived in part of it sounds really appealing to me too.
Yeah, which I really, especially after it did get the just kind of middling reviews, I didn't expect that to be the case. I expected this game to be kind of lacking that overall polish and just be like, okay, maybe it's fun and it's good at what it is, but it's nothing special, and I couldn't disagree more. And maybe I just misinterpreted the overall reception from the get-go, just like I wanted it to be like, this game's amazing, and I just kind of heard, it's all right.
Yeah.
But I would lean closer to amazing than than
I definitely
all right.
would lean amazing on this. And the other thing I wrote in my notes is the townspeople and the lived-in feel kind of reminds me of Skies of Arcadia, if either one of you guys have. So like I'm finding like characters, like in Skies of Arcadia, you're finding these characters that are kind of part of your crew or live on your island, and then they give you these other options. There's like a similar vibe that way, and kind of a similar laid back vibe in the way that like towns area works. So I'm like, oh man, that's great for me. So this hit a lot of my buttons. Chasm did. So good job, BitKid. I'm a fan.
Yeah, BitKid, the developer, and I want to say it's another like one of these really small, if not one person teams, like a super small,
very small
team here. So
yeah,
just another great Metroidvania platformer on the Switch and on every platform for that matter. So I think this game's pretty much available everywhere. So I'm good to leave it there though, Randall. If you are, and if you don't have anything more to add, but,
nope, I recommend it. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. Same here. The stamp of approval.
Yep.
Nice.
Well, I guess we can kind of. It's not a direct correlation, but again, we mentioned kind of the 16-bit graphics on Chasm, and kind of surprise announcement earlier. I guess it was last week and a half ago or so. It doesn't really matter. But they just announced kind of out of nowhere. It's been rumored for a long time, Super Nintendo games are now officially playable on the Nintendo Switch.
Hell yeah.
And there was a nice batch of 20 games, just like they did with the NES Online, and that's a free of charge, or at least free or included with your NES or with your Switch Online membership, which is only $20 a year, which is super cheap. And
it's a damn good value at this point.
Yeah, it's Tetris 99, and then all these, and then obviously the ability to play online. And again, when you're looking at other platforms, are 50, 60, $70 a year. Right? I don't think we ever figured out exactly what PlayStation costs when we talked about that before, but 50 plus, basically.
60, I think. Yeah.
So we're looking at a great value on here, and the added ability to play some of these games online with your friends. So pretty cool, especially on a handful of these games that have some great, there's some good beat 'em ups or some good sports games.
Especially the more obscure titles that are harder to come by.
Yeah, or even stuff like there's a handful, like there's a good amount of like just obvious, Super Mario World, Link to the Past, Super Metroid. Not to belittle these games by any means, these are bona fide classics. But there's stuff that like Demon's Crest or something that like that game goes for multiple hundreds of dollars on cartridge form. So like some of these games are hard to come across. Unless you're a diehard collector, you're probably not going to play these games ever.
Yeah.
So pretty cool that they're spreading the catalog. A good assortment right off the bat. So why don't Randall? I know you've been playing some Stunt Race FX.
I have.
I have never played that game. So
I also had never played that game until
which is
released.
I would say pretty rare for both of us,
Yes.
or I should say for neither of us to have not played a first party Nintendo game on Super Nintendo. That is it's pretty rare. We are both pretty big retro and specifically Super Nintendo fans.
Definitely. So. Yeah, definitely. And me personally, just a big 16-bit person. So yeah.
Yep.
Weird that I hadn't played it yet, but part of the reason is this isn't really a 16-bit game. They use this Super FX chip. It was only the second game that Nintendo used a Super FX chip with, the first one being Star Fox. And that Super FX chip basically allowed them to super beef up the capabilities of the Super Nintendo, allowing for 3D polygons on a system that had no right rendering 3D polygons. But honestly, Super Race FX is pretty impressive that it actually runs on a Super Nintendo. I'd say it almost could pass for an early 32-bit game because it's fully polygonal, which is pretty wild.
It looks a little nicer than Star Fox at a glance. If you're for at least a frame of reference, it's they're smoother polygons for sure. It's not just clearly here are the triangles.
Yeah, I think they learned what they could and couldn't do in Star Fox and applied that here a little bit. It's a very niche title as much as a Nintendo first party developed Nintendo game could be. But yeah, it's a racing game, simplified. You're not getting as many options, or honestly as much fun as you're getting out of something like a Super Mario Kart. But it's interesting, right? It's 3D. So you have like three or four main vehicles. They've all got fun faces. They've got like 12 different courses. But the main mechanics are you're just kind of racing against, 4 other cars. There's turbo boost stuff that you can pick up on the course to kind of keep your turbo going, which is crucial to actually completing it because it has more of a structure like an arcade racer where there's a timer constantly going down at the top of the screen. And if you can't hit the next checkpoint or lap point, you're going to run out of time and your game is over and you've only got 3 lives total. Once you've run out of those lives, it's completely over for you. And for a frame of reference of how difficult this game is, I only made it through 3 out of the 4 courses in the first kind of like intro set of courses. I got my ass beat in this game. And that's after like trying a couple of times. So like, wow, this is not easy. I then realized like, well, okay, I'm hitting too many walls. I'm not using my turbo effectively enough in the straightaways. And as I kind of learned the courses over time, it became a little bit easier. But, because it's early 3D, there's quite a bit of pop-in happening where, at first you're not exactly sure what you're looking at every so often. For instance, like, when you're driving in this one level, you'll run up to a tunnel. And like when you get close to that tunnel, you can't really see into that tunnel. It's just a black screen. And then once you go past that black screen, it kind of loads the tunnel in. Yeah. So there's some of that stuff where like, unless you have this kind of memorized, you're not going to have a great time necessarily. But once you do, it's really not that bad of a game. It's fun for what it is, and being available on this Nintendo or the Super Nintendo online stuff, it's not bad.
Do you know? Does it have a multiplayer? Do you
know? Does.
Because that's another one that if it does have that multiplayer, again, these games having that added online, 2-player functionality is super cool.
Yep.
Gives the opportunity for, again, this is a game that up until recently neither of us had checked out, and if it's like. If you would have been sitting here raving about it, we could be like, hey, let's check it out. Let's play it together, And even still, I'm definitely curious, having never played it.
Of course, because it's available to all of us now. And yeah, it is 2-player. And another fun fact is this game was never made available besides that original cartridge form until this moment. So it was never on any of the eShop services up
or
until
ported
this
to
point.
Game Boy Advance or anything like that.
Nope. Yep.
So,
nothing like that. So... and it has a fun soundtrack and it has a fun atmosphere and they add little like cool effects in the background. Apparently like Star Fox makes an appearance later on. So there's little cool stuff in there. And like there's this bonus game that I ran into where you're controlling a semi truck and it feels like you're controlling a semi truck trying to go through these gates, like you're skiing or something, like the poles or whatever.
like slaloms or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and it's really hard. Surprise. So
okay.
There's stuff there.
I'm definitely curious to try this out, and it's funny you mentioned like bouncing off the walls and taking damage because I actually ended up playing some F-Zero.
There you go.
Yeah, I was going to say,
which is also available, and with that like breakneck pace. And this is a game I played a little bit before. I didn't have it as a kid growing up. I did pick it up when I was collecting retro games and stuff, and I popped it in, played it a few times to make sure it worked.
Sure.
And played it a handful of times as well. But playing it now, I played through like the first circuit, and just like, again, it's just weird to like, you get 3 lives. A lot of these racing games, even I played a little Super Mario Kart, and I don't think it comes into play, but there's a little like kart logo in the bottom of Super Mario Kart that shows like a kart and then ×3, and maybe that's like just there for battle mode, but it was there when I wasn't playing battle mode.
I've actually never noticed that.
But I don't think you can lose
I've definitely noticed it in F-Zero because I've not completed many courses.
It's so hard because you take damage from hitting the walls. You take and if you even like bump another car, I mean, you're going to be, because you're going at this breakneck pace, you're just going to be bouncing, like basically pinballing off the walls.
Yep.
And just taking severe damage.
Yep.
And you can thankfully on some of the tracks like go over like usually right after the finish line.
They have a little
lap
pit
line
area that
that you
regenerates your health and
Yeah, and the soundtrack is just banging.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love the soundtrack on
That
F-Zero.
soundtrack's awesome.
So, yeah, one of the better Super Nintendo soundtracks for sure. And honestly, a little bit of a bummer. I don't think this one has 2 players on it, but
Oh yeah, because that was the thing with the difference between F-Zero and Super Mario Kart was that Mario Kart had the split screen so that they ran it at a slower speed so that you could have multiplayer on it. But F-Zero, because it was moving at like the
So
maximum
fast.
speed, like they could only do it in one player.
And if I'm not mistaken, was this a launch
Yes.
title for the Super Nintendo?
Yep.
It's really impressive.
Yep, it's very impressive as a launch title.
Yeah, I mean, it holds up with some of the later games that are trying to do this kind of like Mode 7 style graphics. I don't even know if it's Mode 7 for sure, but it definitely has that feel. And it has a great sense of speed, which again, a lot of these older racing games, a lot that doesn't hold up. You know, I again, even playing a little Super Mario Kart, which again, obviously it was made to be a slower pace game, but it really doesn't have that feel at all. And again, that's not necessarily what they're going for, but they nailed it with F-Zero. Like the music, everything about it just adds to the intensity. And having a lot of fun playing that. And I actually, with the save point or the suspend points and stuff that you can do on there, I probably will end up seeing this game eventually at some point.
That's not a bad call with that. And just in general, the sense of speed in F-Zero is so impressive because Super Nintendo was not known for that. That was a big talking point for the Sega Genesis against the Super Nintendo back in the day. They had these fast-paced shmups and whatever else that, the Super Nintendo can't do that, but it could. Like F-Zero proved that it was possible if you put the development time into it.
Right. No, it's a lot of fun. And just 2 other games I wanted to mention real quick before we get into maybe a slightly meatier game that you've been playing, John. But just real quick, and especially just because of that added online functionality, there's Super Tennis and Super Soccer, which are both developed by Nintendo. Super Soccer is one that I grew up playing, had as a kid. That was one of the first games I got with my Super Nintendo, and it was like every family reunion, every time there was a birthday party, every time people were at our house, we were all playing a Super Soccer tournament. It's one of those games where you kind of control the whole team at once, or like chunks of the, if you're running to the left, all the forwards are running to the left at the same time.
A lot of sports games did that back in the day.
Yeah, and it doesn't have the side view. It's more of like a front to back view. I get, you're basically running bottom to top or top to bottom as opposed to left to right, if that makes sense on the screen. But it just has a good pace. I don't know. It just has a good energy to the game. It has a really great soundtrack. Like each country has its own song.
Oh, that's cool.
Associated with it. So for that each half, that team song will play.
Nice.
That's cool.
Whoever's on whatever side of the field. And then Super Tennis is one that both Randall and I have put a ton of time into, playing like some super late nights. And then I know we've had some late nights at some of my old places, like playing with, I think you've played with us before, John, maybe not, but I know like DJ, Max, Glenn, like I know Max and I have had some crazy late nights playing that game too. So, and Randy and I both played some online just a little bit ago, just while we were waiting for John to get here. So pretty cool to be able to fire that up. Although the one thing I'll say, it's a little finicky to get into the online games. How were you able to do that again, Randall? I forget what you needed to do.
Yeah, you have to go into like online play, and then you have to select an option that says something to the effect of like, play this game while you wait for your friend. And then that allows your friend to actually find your game when they select online game. Like you'll be an option in that kind of lobby box.
Yeah, so you have to like pick a game before. You can't just open a lobby, invite the person. Like they have to have an active game going, I guess, which is sort of weird, but I'm sure they'll either fix that, or if not, it's just a small little finicky aspect that you'll just get used to. So, but John, what have you been playing on the SNES Online service?
So I've been playing like a lot of the normal games, the classic games of the Super Mario World and like Super Metroid games that I've like played a lot and loved a lot. Course. But one that I was very pleasantly surprised to see that was included in the whole package at launch was Breath of Fire, the first in the series. Breath of Fire 2 was like my introduction to RPGs as a genre and is very important to me as a game. And Breath of Fire, after playing Breath of Fire 2, I went back and played Breath of Fire. and they're not as bare bones RPGs as, say, like the original Final Fantasy or like Dragon Quest, but they're still in that era where things are a little obtuse. Like they're introducing a lot of ambitious mechanics that are kind of hard to understand unless you are either reading a guide or had like the Prima like walkthrough that you bought at a bookstore. But I think that they're really fun games, and I'm really glad that I got the opportunity to play like the original Breath of Fire again. Even if like at the very beginning of the game, like I was getting poisoned by practically every other enemy, and then dying, and then losing my gold, and then having to just grind out for the first like 30 minutes or so. But the second half, like as soon as like most games, like in the Breath of Fire series, you have Ryu, who's the main character, who's of the Dragon Clan, and there's always Nina, who's one of the, like, she has in the Winged Clan, or Wingalia is usually the city that she's from, and then you meet other, like, I think a thing that I've always liked about the game is that there are relatively few humans in your party in the entire series.
That's cool.
Like I just met Bo, who is the like wolf character, and I know like later on there's like a fish man, and then there's a Naga who is like the like half snake sorceress, and I just think it's a game that has a lot of charm to it in just how unique it feels, as opposed to like, oh, here's your like group of like humans who is
four
like
teenagers,
right? So I think like, yeah.
So what's like the setting? Is it like a fantasy?
Yeah, it's a typical like fantasy RPG. Like there's magic, and like you wield a sword, and like it's nothing new in terms of like the world that you like traverse through. Like there's always going to be, you're fighting wizards and stuff, but I just think that it's a very like unique game in the way that it looks, kind of like the world that you inhabit. I always was really drawn to it, and it might be the nostalgia factor of it was a game that was really important to me when I was a kid, but I think it's a really fun RPG, and I was really glad to see it. And I hope that because it's one of the, you know, it's out there before Chrono Trigger or any of Final Fantasy VI.
Right.
Yeah, like I think it's the only like JRPG offering at the moment. So hopefully people will check it out.
That is kind of cool for it. Gives it the spotlight for a second. That is cool.
Yeah. I'm excited for people to try it, and hopefully
Capcom
like,
RPG, no less.
Yeah.
And I do know what you're saying about the art style. Like I maybe I'm sure some of the nostalgia carries over, but I think it doesn't just look like a Square RPG. It definitely has like a different character to it.
Yeah.
A different like color palette, and just has a different style to it.
Yeah. They always seemed like brighter games than the other RPGs of the time.
Yeah.
Which I always liked.
Nice. Well, I guess we can pretty much wrap that up there. We've obviously there's 20 new games on the SNES, or 20 games from the SNES available on the online service on the Switch. If you are a subscriber to that, definitely worth checking some of these out. And one feature again to just hammer home that suspend feature. One of the things I love about that is like getting through the opening chunk of a game, like Link to the Past. Like I can just get through all the slow opening thing, create a suspend point right there. So like even if I'm not in the mood to keep playing it right then, or if I just want to, hey, if I ever play this game again, I can just start right at the actual beginning of the game.
That's a really good call. Yeah.
Yeah. Just skip through some of the tedium of the beginning of the game.
That makes it a lot more accessible.
Especially for an RPG or so. I mean, I don't know what the pace of the beginning of Breath of Fire is like, but you know, I'm sure it can help cut some of that out.
It is funny to think about, because like I used like the suspend points almost like all the time when I was playing like the NES titles, but as soon as like the SNES titles came, and most of them have save points in the games, I was like, I stopped using the suspend point, but I should honestly pick it back up.
Yeah, because it's just like you can.
It does make it so much easier.
It just streamlines. It's just like, I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but it's like when me and my brother would just leave the NES on all night and overnight so that we could pick up where we left off in the morning. So it's just like doing that, but without having to leave your power running all night. So.
Or having to leave the Super Nintendo in like the idle state on your Switch, leaving that open. Now you can save state that, close it, so you can open up Chasm or whatever game and play that.
Right. Yeah, so I'm definitely a big supporter of that feature. So, yeah, and I think they did add a couple of other just small features of like you can rearrange the games alphabetically or by the anyways, just some nice quality of life features on both the NES and the Super Nintendo application or whatever. So
definitely
excited to dig into more and excited to see what they bring next, because there's a nice selection, but there's definitely some games missing as well. So more than a few. So, but anyways, I've been playing a bunch of space games lately, and I'm kind of gonna end up on one, but I've dipped back into one and started up another one. But I'll start with the kind of refresher here, and I just played a little more No Man's Sky, which I talked about. I picked it up right after, or right when they announced, or right around the time that Beyond or the 2.0 update was coming out. And so last time I talked about it on the podcast, I had played through most of the tutorial, or so I thought. But so I'm on I restarted the game after I thought I had some kind of glitch where I just landed on some super hostile planet, and it turns out that's just how the game starts, and you're supposed to learn, hey, these are the survival mechanics of the game. So I got through that chunk, and then just recently in my last playthrough was able to go scavenge for all the rest of the parts to repair my ship, or all the things that I needed to craft the parts for my ship or whatever. And then so I got that all prepared, and I was like, okay, this game's about to open up, sweet. And I get in the ship, and it's awesome. Like the way that you fly, when I'm zooming from one planet, I flew from one planet to another, and it was awesome. Like, and it shows like you're aiming at the planet that you're flying towards. Yeah. And it straight up says like, and I'm going at like full speed, and it's like, this is going to take 30 minutes to fly there. Like it's showing, and then you can go into speed bursts, and that cuts it down to maybe 20. Mm-hmm. And then you can go into like hyperdrive, and it just like goes, it just, the stars are zooming past you, and it's like, now it's like 45 seconds, but it still feels like it feels intense. Tangible. Like, yeah, you're like zooming in. And one thing I'll say, I know, there's all this talk about the HD rumble on the Switch. I will say that the rumble on the PlayStation 4 DualShock controller is so superior to the Nintendo rumble. Whether you're playing Pro Controller, Joy-Con, it is like a tangible, like that controller, like when something is shaking, I mean, your hands are like shaking, and we're like the Joy-Cons and the Pro Controller just like vibrate. It's almost like it makes my hands numb over time, depending on the game. But I really actually strongly dislike the HD rumble. But that's beside the point. But I really the only reason I brought it up is because the DualShock was really adding to that, like, holy shit, is this ship gonna hold together? Especially because I just finished building it, and
that is really cool.
So it felt great, and it still is just, I've got to get VR. I got to get VR for this. But anyway, so
is there a chance that your ship could break down going into the like hyperdrive or like faster than light mode?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose there's definitely a chance that maybe if your stuff isn't repaired, right. Probably not in this scenario that I was in.
Sure,
but maybe later in the game,
Yeah.
But anyway, so I land on this planet, and it's a little different. And I'm exploring around, and now I'm basically in the tutorial of now building my base on this new planet. So I got about halfway through that, and I was just like, okay, this is a lot of learning. I'm not quite ready for this just yet. So I'll keep updating No Man's Sky as we go. And once I'm really excited to get into the meat of this game, but because what's there and some of the experiences I've had while playing so far have been really I hate to use, it's such a cheesy word to use, but it's been so immersive. Like I've really, I'm looking for that space adventure game. I've mentioned before on the podcast, I really love Star Trek, and just in general, I tend to gravitate towards sci-fi stuff in general.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for that like adventure that makes me feel like I'm adventuring through space. Something that's going to give me those feelings I'm having with Chasm, but in outer space. I just really like that fantasy in my head. So I ended up signing up for yet another subscription service, and I signed up for the Xbox Game Pass, and I'm doing it actually on my PC. I got a new laptop that is by no means a powerful gaming PC, but apparently powerful enough to play some pretty decently demanding games. So I played a little Astroneer as well.
Nice.
Which is pretty similar to No Man's Sky in what I've played so far. Different art style, but sort of similar in some regards, but a little more on like the low poly side and a little more like, I don't know if it's cell shaded per se, but it has a little bit of that feel to it. But it feels, some of the aspects like the terrain tool and some of the things that you get feel a little more natural, and like the interface is really like you carry this pack around on your back and you can like pull it off, and everything feels really tangible, but it's also kind of confusing until I'm sure once you get to know what everything does and is. But it had a really similar feel to the No Man's Sky opening of just like, man, there's a lot to learn about this game and a lot of crafting and a lot of survival, and you got to make these tether lines that supply you with oxygen, and
I'm kind of into that though. That sounds kind of appealing.
Oh yeah.
It definitely is, and that Astroneer was, to be honest, one of the games that definitely piqued my interest for trying out this Game Pass, which for what it's worth, I've signed up for the first month for $1, and then I think $1 a month, and then I think it's $5 a month after that, at least for the time being. So
that's crazy for as many games as are available on Game Pass. It's
yeah,
nuts.
I mean, I downloaded probably 30 or 40 games, and the nice thing about this is you are actually downloading these games. You're not streaming them. You just, you won't have access to them if you stop paying for Game Pass, but you have them you have the file, the program running off your computer as opposed to streaming it from some server or something. Right. So that really appealed to me because I have tried the PlayStation Now service before, and it's a little laggy or a little, it's just noticeable that it's not playing smoothly,
Agreed.
And these, I've had just no issues playing either Astroneer or the other game that I ended up digging into, which is definitely different, but it's giving me a little bit of that space fix that I'm looking for, and I've been playing a lot of Void Bastards.
Yeah, this game looks really good. Astroneer also looked really good, but
yeah, and I definitely am excited to play more. I got to pretty much the same point. I was getting ready to repair my ship and take off the planet, and it was like, okay, let's take a break and come back to this when I'm ready for that experience, because I just wasn't in the right frame of mind.
Yeah.
But Void Bastards is yet another roguelike title to some capacity, and it's got a really great art style. That's what caught my eye about this game, because it is a first-person shooter, which is, I know I've talked about Super Hot and maybe another shooter at some point on the podcast, but usually if they catch my eye, it's because it's something like Super Hot that's like unique and
stylized
and different and yeah, and this has definitely got and no question about it, very cell shaded graphical style that's made to almost look like comic books. And this is from one of the developer leads of BioShock and System Shock 2.
Yeah.
I forget his name, but he's like the lead of this game, and essentially you're going in with really, it has a lot of those BioShock elements where everything's kind of responding to the environment, or you can set traps and everything interacts with one another. You walk over some oil and now you're slipping all over the place, and there's just everything's just very like a lot of these roguelike titles, like everything plays the enemies can harm each other. So if you're one enemy shooting at you from a distance, or like a turret, you can kind of lure an enemy out in front of them, or just like a lot more strategy to it than a typical shooter, because you're almost every door you can go in and lock it behind you, and the enemies cannot unlock doors, at least none of the ones that I've experienced so far. But essentially the loop of this game, and it will say it does suffer a little bit from that, you have to play a handful of runs to gather supplies, to craft new weapons, to make it to where okay, my playthroughs are now meaningful,
right?
Because I actually have stuff, kind of like Rogue Legacy,
right?
Or games that we've talked about on the podcast in the past. You probably can if you're really good, but I suck at shooters, and this game is hard, and it's hard to explain why, because there's not an onslaught of enemies, typically at least, but there's all kinds of cool stuff where sometimes you go to you have a star chart that you pick your path, and you gather so basically you raid ships. It plays out similarly to something like FTL almost, which I've actually never played, but just the general structure of the game. You're or maybe FTL is not, or Heat Signature is the game I'm thinking of. Sorry, but you're basically like landing on these ships and then raiding them for supplies and food and fuel. And then you're taking that stuff to your star map, and you have every sandwich you find is 1 day worth of food, and every gasoline tank you find is 1 day worth of fuel. So sometimes you can say, so you'll travel from one node to the next, and you can kind of pick your path, kind of like Star Fox, and you're picking your path, and you say, and it'll show you like this ship is going to have enemies have half health because there's infighting on this ship, and the power's out, so you have to restore the power, or all the lights are out. Or all the enemy, or like all the doors are unlocked and you can't lock them. Like the grid is fried or something. There's all kinds of different modifiers. And then you have kind of similar to Rogue Legacy again. Every character has like, they might be colorblind, or they might cough every once in a while and alert enemies, or they might have extra health. They might have low health. They might have, any number of, qualifiers to their, or they might be able to see enemies on the mini map or whatever. So you're basically like raiding these ships. There's different areas, and you always know like, okay, this generator room always has the power supply, and you can look at the mini map, but you can't, it's always going to be different, and it's always going to, you can sometimes like you have a limited oxygen supply as well. So you're under the gun on each ship. You have about 7 minutes, and then you can upgrade that, or you can upgrade it on each ship and double that timer.
Nice.
It's got all kinds of really cool mechanics, and it does, once you get over that initial hump of like you've crafted a few weapons, because like everything's sparse, you're low on ammo, you're low on weapons, but now I have like 3 different guns and then secondary weapons and this and that, and you can, every ship you land on, you're taking a new loadout with you.
Yeah.
So you can like, okay, I used all my bullets, now I'm going to use my staple gun for the next, the next ship or whatever. Or, you can even travel and like, let's say you're bulked up on food and you're like, what, I'm low on health. You can rest for a day and have you consume food, but you don't have to actually land on the ship just yet. You can just wait and, okay, I need to regain a health. I have a lot of extra food right now. So it's got a lot of strategy, like a ton of strategy. I shouldn't say a ton, that's a little strong maybe, but there's a lot of thought going into like, how do I want to approach this room? Or like, hey, there's the main objective, or there's one valuable item on this ship that I know I can get, but maybe I'm just going to let it go. Maybe I'm just going to... So there is like we love our risk reward on this podcast, or at least I do. And it has that very just tangible feeling of like, do I want to go for that last room? Like, I see there's a lot of loot in there, but
go for it.
I also see some heavy enemies, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to plow through them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm kind of that, like, I want to get everything on the ship. Go for it. But, and it's cool, like, even the containers and stuff that you're unlocking are typically where you're finding items. Like, sometimes they're just on the floor or after you kill an enemy. But sometimes, or most of the time, they're in these like cabinets or lockers or whatever that have like they're lit up green, and they're every now and then they're locked, and you have to spend like your merit points that you can also find throughout the ships and stuff, and you start with a certain amount to unlock those. But if like the power to the ship is down, which again sometimes even I think enemies, if you alert too many enemies or the wrong enemy or something, they can shut the ship down, and then you can't open it. Like they're powered doors, I guess, so you can't, and when the power's out you can't lock the doors, right. You can't, it adds a lot of strategy and a lot of like throws a lot of curveballs into the mix, both in the sense of just how different each ship is, and each like there's different, just like you're landing on these like luxury cruise ships, spaceships, that is. I keep saying ships, and I feel like I haven't mentioned space in a while. But like, these luxury cruise ships that always have like more food and more supplies, but don't typically have a ton of enemies. But you're never going to find like, or not typically going to find like the super valuable stuff, but you're going to get the supplies you need,
Right.
So I don't know. There's a lot going on, and again, I just love the art style. It's like for a game that's relatively violent, you're just shooting, mowing down enemies, but they're all like kind of these mutants. It's very sci-fi. It just doesn't, it's not a lot of gore per se.
Right, that helps with
it's
that.
It's very comic booky.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's mature, but it's it doesn't like get off on that, I guess, which is always nice.
Nice.
So I think I found at at least for the time being, my space adventure game. Because again, it really does feel like you're like going on these missions and like, okay, I gotta just get what I can get. And even when you die, you're keeping all those supplies, so you are playing for a purpose. And it took me maybe half hour to an hour to get over that hump of both figuring out what the game is doing and the loop of the game, but also to get to where I had enough supplies to make it feel like I had a chance.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know. I wouldn't say that hinders the experience, but just know that going in that you might have to just hack through the first hour or so. Yeah. But
I'm glad that you found your space adventure game, because I found my space adventure game.
Nice.
With Risk of Rain 2.
Yes, we've played some of this together, so I'm excited to talk. But why don't you take the lead, because you've played far more than I have so far.
Yeah. So Risk of Rain 2 was the sequel to the indie title Risk of Rain, which was a 2D action platformer roguelike.
Yeah, and we talked about it, I think, way back on, you said episode 4, Randall, I think? Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that is a game where it's randomized levels where you are gaining, you're killing enemies and you're gaining gold, and you're using that gold to unlock items which give you various power-ups. And the main difference with Risk of Rain 2 is that they've translated that experience as a 2D action platformer to a 3D like shooter,
like third-person shooter.
Yeah, and I was really interested in it, mostly just because I thought that was a really interesting way for a sequel to evolve in this day and age. Usually, if you're making a series, like that transition for like Mario from like 2D to 3D was a huge step.
Oh yeah.
But like you don't usually see titles make that leap anymore.
Yeah, that was like almost like just out of necessity of like, hey, we need to just make a 3D version. Yeah.
So I was really interested to see, especially for an indie developer, like how like that was going to change the like core mechanics of the game that I really enjoyed. I loved Risk of Rain, the original. Beat it a couple times, only unlocked like a few characters. Like there was a ton of that game that even though I played it a lot, I didn't access a lot of it.
There's like 12 different characters or something in the first one, which is awesome.
But so for the second game, they translated it into a 3D game, and I was amazed at how many of the skills that I had from the first title just translated directly over to the second title. Like,
it feels like almost the same game,
which is incredible.
That's insane.
It feels so tight.
Yeah, and honestly, the only difference is like I was able to play the first one, even though it would get super crazy and overwhelming. Like you could kind of hunker down and like just zen out with that game in a weird way. Where this game, because it is like third-person shooter, and you do have to, there's a little more twitchiness to it with just the nature of aiming with the joystick, But otherwise, I mean, your abilities feel almost identical. They are identical, but feel as useful and as identical to the first game. With at least some of these characters, there are some new characters too, I think. But
and like another thing that I really like about the game is that like they have moved almost all of the abilities that were in the original title over to the second one. So like you'll get an item that if you're motionless, like then you'll start to regenerate health faster, or you have a chance with every attack to launch a missile, or every attack has the chance of like causing chain lightning that will damage other enemies. So like the whole progression of the game is killing enemies to get gold to unlock these items. And then once you've basically as you've explored a level and you've gained as many items as you want or as you can, then you go to a teleporter and you start the teleporter, and that will summon the boss of the level. And you have to defeat the boss and charge the teleporter up to 100% in order to move on to the next level. And so that usually starts this whole like wave of enemies that you're using all the items that you've gathered up, that you've grown stronger through the level. And like it incentivizes you to explore and to engage with as many enemies as possible. But as you're doing this, also there's a difficulty slider that the longer that you are progressing through the levels, the harder it gets.
Oh, geez.
So the easy mode will like have it as a much slower, like you can have a lot more time elapse before it moves from easy to medium, whereas Monsoon is the like the hardest one, and it just zips through difficulty levels.
Yeah, because even on normal, whatever the normal difficulty setting is, it is difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, and it's meant to be that way. But me and you played John online.
I was curious about how this worked. Yeah.
And it works pretty smooth. You know, I don't think we had any real like lag issues or anything like that.
I will say when you get to the incredibly higher like difficulty levels, like they're just spawning enemies nonstop. And we're playing on the Switch.
Yeah.
Because this game has been in early access on
PC for about a year, maybe not quite that long, but for a while, yeah. And it still sort of is in early access. I mean, it didn't say that specifically, but there's clearly like little logos in the game, like where the characters are. Like, here's 3 wrenches that are like in development. We're going to have more characters here eventually.
Wow. Yeah, and same with more items as well. So I'm very excited. Like I've like been playing with you, like I've unlocked almost every character except one, and I'm very excited for like that, and like however long, like in a year or like 2, like there might be 3 new characters
or maybe more. And
how cool is that?
Yeah, I'm so excited to be able to like come back to this game and have it have so much new stuff like at some point down the line.
Right.
Yeah, and one nice touch too that this game has over the first one, and it's just a small aesthetic thing, but to me always makes a difference, is like as you're picking up these different perks and items, like your character actually like carries or like has like a new like pack that they're wearing or a new thing strapped to their arm, like cool. Your character's uniform. You know, unfortunately in Chasm, you know, you get all these cool things that you build and make and craft for yourself, but your character always looks the same.
Besides the weapon, it's the only thing that changes.
Yeah, so that always feels satisfying. Like, hey, when you get a new gold helm and you actually wear it, your character actually has it on, or you get some. And some of these are crazy. You know, you look crazy,
pretty
like,
bonkers. Like just later on.
Yeah, these like claw arms, like reaching off your back, and like there's all kinds of crazy stuff. But it just looks cool. Like you're just like, holy shit, I have a lot, and all the abilities like stack.
Yeah,
you know, if you get the speed burst or like increases your run speed or your sprint speed. Like,
you can
if you get it again, you just keep, or if you get the double jump, if you keep getting it, now you have a triple jump or a quadruple jump. So everything just stacks. I think infinitely.
Yeah, like one of my you'll
never get more than 4 or 5 probably. But.
Right. I've done a couple of runs where like the maximum number of items I have is in like the 20s or so. But there are also like different shrines that you can interact with that have like some of them summon enemies, some of them are like a chance to give you an item. But one of my favorite, I think it's called the Optimizer or the Streamliner or something. And what it does is it counts the maximum number of items that you have, and then it picks either like 2 or 3 of those items, and it totals the entire, so if you have like 20 items, like you'll have 10 of these 2 items. So you'll just, instead of having a wide range of abilities, you'll just have these 2 abilities at like a god tier.
Just maxed out. Yeah.
That's sweet.
So like, I had a run where I had like a bunch of items and I went to that shrine, but then I basically lost all of my offensive abilities, and it was super late in the game. But what I did have was I had the teddy bear, which gives you a chance for the enemies to miss damage. So I was basically just fighting a boss, hoping that they were just going to miss like 90% of their attacks.
Yeah.
Oh God.
It's such a fun like way to like really like change up how your play style. Because even there was another one of the first runs I did on the game, like one of the achievements was there's a 3D printer where you put an item in and it will give you back whatever item it's displaying. But it's a random, you don't get to choose which power up you're putting in.
Yeah, you can't say like, oh, I don't want my double jump, so I'm going to get rid of that and trade it for this.
Right, so you're just at the mercy
throwing away
of
a random, yeah.
And I was just trying to get like an achievement, which I think it was called maybe just one more, where you put 7 items into the same 3D printer. And what I ended up doing was I ended up getting a really powerful, like stacking the med kit which gives you a delay heal every time you take damage.
Nice.
So for the majority of the run, like I had basically written off this run because I was like, I'll just get this achievement at the very least before I die. But I ended up getting, because I had so much of that ability stacked up, like every damage that was done to me, I was healing for more than I was getting damaged.
Wow.
So I basically I didn't
Hit me.
I didn't get to the maximum level of difficulty, but I got incredibly far in like a very early run in the game.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it was just so fun to see every level and just do so many different things.
And the levels are a little, to me, a little cooler than they are in the two. Like everything in the 2D in the original game is like everything's the perspective super zoomed out and everything's just very minimally detailed, which I do like that style. And this does carry over some of the minimalist, like everything's pretty like flatly shaded,
or there's 4 textures in the level,
limited polygons and
looks
stuff.
Great,
and they're a little
really
more lived in again.
Done.
Like there's the little snow base with the fence with the barbed wire around it, just like little touches that this feels like a space that exists to some degree, as opposed to I don't know. In the first game, it just felt like these are just. It felt more like it was just some random tile sets. You know?
Oh, okay. And every level is a set arena. Like it doesn't change. Like the only thing that changes is the placement of items throughout that.
The treasure chests and the little capsules and stuff. Yeah,
right. So that layout's never going to be the same from time to time. But okay, this path is always going to lead up to this area, and you after you've done a few runs, you really get to learn each level and the layouts of stuff, and it feels really good to explore those different 3D arenas.
Yeah,
Nice.
I agree, and I will say that I had been playing on normal up until I played with John. I think I played one random match with someone online, and they set it to the easy difficulty. But once John had mentioned hey, really the only difference is that difficulty slider that just progresses with time,
Right.
Just moves slower. So it was able to give me at least a little more of that taste of that kind of Zen experience that I was talking about with the first game, because at least for the first level, you don't have to just beeline and just find whatever I can find in the first 5 minutes and then find the portal and activate it and go. Because you are a little bit in a crunch if you're playing on normal, where on easy, all it really did was just let us explore the level at more of our pace for the first level or two. But I mean, we were getting, and I think playing 2 players, it seemed like it was spawning 3 of every boss when we would get to activate the boss battle. And you can play up to 4 players online on this, which is another.
That's really
I don't think
cool.
there's. Yeah, and that was the big selling point with me. I knew John was going to get it.
Oh yeah.
I'm assuming you're going to get it at some point, Randall.
I will be buying this.
Getting that physical copy.
Oh yes.
And I think I've been talking to DJ here and there about it, and he's keeps saying I think I'm gonna get Risk Arena too. I think I'm gonna get. I know John's been texting him a little bit. He's at least mentioned it to me a couple times. So I think that game's gonna be something that we will continue to also follow up with.
Because there are some characters that are really interesting in the mechanics, because every character controls basically
so
completely different.
Each character has 4 different abilities.
That goes a long
like,
way.
Yeah, and some of them I'm I don't like playing this as a single player experience, but I can totally see how this would be a great support character, or I would love to just play with a group of people where this is the character that I'm playing with.
Yeah. I'm very curious to play more of this online, both with you and hopefully once everybody gets it, we can do some 4-player, maybe even stream some if we get up to it. So
let's do it.
Haven't done any streaming in a while, so yeah, that'd be a lot of fun, and I'm just definitely looking forward to playing more of this game. It's a lot of fun. You have to be up for a challenge. I will say that's just it. I wouldn't just get it based on this game looks cool. You gotta be in the mood to play it. You gotta be up for it, but.
There's
when you're
no
in the
shame
mood,
in playing it on Drizzle.
Exactly.
That's what I do.
Exactly. It does make it a slightly more, at least for me, enjoyable experience. So, and I've just turned into that kind of gamer. Whatever settings I can put it on, or whatever I can do to make my gaming experience more fun for me.
Of course,
that's how it needs to be. If it needs to be,
it's your leisure
mode. Yeah, it's exactly. It's I'm relaxing. I sometimes don't want to I love playing challenging hard games. We've talked about Celeste, Super Meat Boy, all these crazy platformers and stuff, but sometimes I just want to play. I want to think as much as I think when I play Stardew Valley, which is basically not at all.
Yep.
All right, yeah, so I think that pretty much does it for Risk of Rain 2 for now, but I think we'll be coming back to this one in the future. I know you and I will be playing more of this, John, and we'll hopefully play some more with Randall and DJ once they get their grubby mitts on it. So
for sure. Absolutely.
But I think we could pretty much wrap up the episode there this week as well, guys. Talked about a bunch of cool games, little throwback action, little
hell yeah,
little new action. I don't know, all over the place, but excited to play some more of these and to talk some more games in a little bit. I think we're going to stick around and do a little twofer again today. So John's going to join us again next week. And in the meantime, for the month of September, we'll be playing Katana Zero, and we'll be talking about that on the last episode of the month. Sometimes they end up coming out on the first episode of the following month. We'll figure that out, what day that'll actually land on once we get there. But yeah, we'll be playing some Katana Zero, and we'll look forward to talking about that as well. But until next week, we will catch you guys next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. I mean, when I first looked up that game, it was like basically like, for all you OCD people out there, this is the game for you.
Organizing things.
Yeah.
To like just chill music.
Nice.
What the fuck are these shots, man?
I don't know. You're just not very good at this game, I guess.
I guess not. I lost my touch.